The worst betrayal doesn't come from your enemies. It comes from the ones who kissed your forehead while sharpening the knife. They didn't storm out. They didn't scream. They simply shifted, quietly. One day they stopped showing up, not physically, but emotionally. You could still hear their voice, but the warmth was gone. They used to check in. Now they check out. Right in front of you. That's the kind of betrayal that lingers. Not the one that breaks loudly, but the one that fades without warning. You gave them everything, your trust, your effort, the kind of presence that only a loyal man can offer. And what did they give you back? Silence when you needed answers, distance when you needed closeness, a smile that no longer reached their eyes. It's subtle at first. You think maybe it's you, maybe you said too much, maybe you cared too deeply. You shrink, you second guess, you bend just to keep things from breaking. But deep down, you feel it. A shift in tone, a delayed response, an absence that's louder than presence. And what makes it worse is that you never expected it from them. You held them high. You believed they would never, until they did. This isn't just about being hurt. This is about the kind of pain that teaches you, not who they were, but who you are. You are the man who stayed loyal, the man who gave freely, the man who still showed up, even when things felt off. But now, you're the man who sees, who notices the patterns, who no longer mistakes inconsistency for love. This isn't about bitterness, it's about clarity. The moment where you stop trying to fix what someone else chose to break. Most men carry this pain silently. They bottle it up, convince themselves it wasn't that deep. But the truth is, some cuts never bleed, yet they carve through bone. Today is not about revenge. It's about recognition, the courage to name what hurt you, and the strength to no longer tolerate it. Because betrayal doesn't just take your trust, it tests your identity. And if you're ready to rebuild, you have to start by letting go of what blurred your vision. In the next few minutes, we'll uncover the signs, the shifts, the silent moments that reveal far more than words ever could. This isn't about pointing fingers, it's about pointing forward. Because the man you become after betrayal, if you do it right, will never settle for less than truth again. Number 1, disloyalty. If you're still giving loyalty to people who resent your growth, who vanish when you struggle, or only show up when there's something to gain, then understand this. You're not preserving a bond. You're preserving a wound. Because every time you share your wins and their face doesn't light up, every time you fall and they're nowhere to be found, every time you doubt yourself because they treat you like you're replaceable, you lose a piece of your own self-respect. And no man can live his purpose while tolerating that kind of erosion. This isn't about becoming bitter. This is about becoming wise. It's about recognizing that the man who wants peace must first build a perimeter around his life that keeps parasites out. Sometimes those parasites wear familiar faces. Sometimes they say all the right things, but disappear when it matters. Sometimes they clap for your struggle and grow quiet when you rise. You have to become the kind of man who notices these shifts, the way their tone changes. When you talk about your dreams, the way they smirk. When others speak well of you, the way they always seem closer to you. When you're down and distant when you're focused, pay attention. because people rarely say, "I'm disloyal." They reveal it through subtle withdrawals, delayed responses, and selective absence. The mistake most men make is trying to fix it, trying to prove their worth, loyalty, trying to earn from others what must first be required of yourself. So stop chasing clarity from people who benefit from your confusion. Stop explaining your boundaries to people committed to crossing them. Just stop, because when you remain loyal to people who aren't loyal back, you don't look noble, you look blind, you look emotionally bankrupt. The world respects men who walk away from the table when respect is no longer being served. That doesn't mean you become rude or cynical or closed off. It means you lead with truth. You give access only to those who've earned it through action, not through history, not through obligation, and definitely not through guilt. And here's the uncomfortable truth. You don't owe people unlimited access just because they once stood beside you. Loyalty is earned in the present, not borrowed from the past. If someone has shown you they cannot walk with you into your future, stop dragging them through your present. You don't have to announce your exit, just move differently, quietly, strategically. The man who walks in silence is often the man who walks in power. And if you've ever felt tempted to confront someone who betrayed you just to be understood, ask yourself this: why would you explain your value to someone who's already proven they don't know how to recognize it? That's not closure, that's self-negotiation, and it always ends in more compromise. Instead, build clarity through distance, through discipline, through quiet observation. Let people reveal themselves, let their patterns speak, and when they do, believe them the first time. Because once you've seen the truth, you can't unsee it, and to pretend you didn't is to betray yourself again. Loyalty is powerful, but only when it's mutual, only when it flows both ways. So, ask yourself, who's pouring into your life? Who's showing up without being asked? Who celebrates your wins in public and defends your name in private? Keep them close, but for everyone else, start adjusting access, not with hate, but with clarity. Because the man who holds peace as his highest value no longer trades it for validation. He no longer justifies disrespect. He no longer explains why he has standards. He no longer lets loyalty become a leash. He becomes selective, not bitter, not broken, but precise. Because in the end, it's not about how many people surround you. It's about how few of them you'd trust when the lights go out. Choose those people, and if you don't have them yet, don't panic, don't rush. Stand still, stand strong, and watch the right ones find their way to a man who finally found his peace. Number 2, deception. Not all betrayal comes with blood. Some of it walks in slowly, smiling, soft-spoken, disguised as love. It doesn't shout, it doesn't slam doors. It doesn't always cheat in the way you expect. Instead, it studies you. It learns your fears. It memorizes your soft spots. And when the moment is right, it lies. Not with malice, but with calculation. That's deception. It's not just a single lie, not just a secret text or a hidden conversation. It's the pattern, the performance, a slow erosion of truth. Dressed up in good intentions, And the most dangerous thing about deception isn't what's hidden, it's what's carefully shown to distract you from what's being concealed. If you've ever trusted someone with your soul, and they use that trust as a tool, you know this pain. It's not the shock that cuts deepest, it's the realization that they didn't just betray you, they studied you, they mapped your kindness, they fed you just enough truth to keep you from asking the real questions. And while they smiled at you, they built another life. In shadows you couldn't see, in conversations you weren't part of, in stories where you didn't exist. You weren't naive, you were honest, you believed their words because they spoke them with sincerity. But sincerity isn't the same as integrity, and deception knows how to wear sincerity like perfume, temporary, pleasant, and completely artificial. And when it fades, what you're left with is a broken compass. Because that's what deception does. It rewires your internal sense of direction. It makes you question what's real. It plants doubt, not just in others, but in yourself. You begin replaying moments. Was that conversation genuine? Was that look of affection real? Was I ever loved or just useful? You spiral, not because you're weak, but because lies, when repeated long enough, start sounding like logic. And if you're not careful, you begin to abandon your gut just to stay close to the person who made you question it. That's the trap, not just being lied to, but being conditioned to doubt your own truth. And society will tell you, forgive, understand her pain. She didn't mean it like that. But society won't sit with you at 2 a.m. when you can't sleep, because your mind is spinning with 100 versions of what might have been true. They won't be there when you look at your own reflection and struggle to believe yourself anymore, because deception isn't just a betrayal of facts, it's a betrayal of clarity. And without clarity, a man loses everything: his focus, his discipline, his fire, his peace. And the saddest part, it rarely happens overnight. Deception is patient, it's methodical, it doesn't rush, it conditions, it teaches you to ignore small things. The offhand comment, the energy shift, the convenient silence, until one day you don't even recognize the version of you that accepted all this as normal. You've lost time, you've lost self-trust, you've lost your voice, and the one person who should have protected it used it for leverage. But this isn't where the story ends, this is where it begins. Because if you've ever walked through this darkness, you now hold a power. Most men never find the ability to see lies before they speak, to read intentions without hearing words, to feel when something's off, without needing proof. And from that place, you don't beg for the truth. You simply recognize its absence. You stop chasing clarity from liars. You start building clarity within. You don't escape deception by confronting liars. You escape it by confronting yourself, the version of you that kept giving the benefit of the doubt long after the truth was already visible. Because here's the truth: the most dangerous liar isn't the one who hides everything, it's the one who hides just enough while sprinkling in moments of honesty to keep you confused. They say just enough to make you hesitate. They confess just enough to seem transparent. and they apologize just enough to make you feel guilty for staying guarded. But don't be fooled. Deception isn't always loud. Sometimes it's well-timed silence. Sometimes it's the perfect excuse. Sometimes it's the habit of shifting blame, not to attack you, but to keep you in doubt. You've probably seen it. The friend who compliments you in public, but cuts you down in private. The partner who pulls away whenever you ask hard questions, then turns it around and calls you controlling. The relative who smiles at holidays, but poisons your name behind closed doors. And the longer you stay in that fog, the more you question yourself. Not because you're wrong, but because you're being manipulated. To feel wrong for noticing, that's the true damage, not the lie, but the gaslight that follows it, the emotional guilt traps, the constant "you're overreacting," the "I didn't mean it that way," the way they cry, not because they're sorry, but because they know it resets the balance and keeps you apologizing instead of asking for answers. So how do you break it? Not by collecting more evidence, not by shouting for truth, but by setting internal rules. Rule 1. When someone lies to you once, assume they're capable of lying again, not because you're paranoid, but because your peace is too valuable to gamble on patterns you've already seen. Rule 2. Believe behavior over words. Words can be rehearsed, but behavior is muscle memory. Look for inconsistencies, avoidance, too many explanations, a timeline that always shifts. If your gut says something's wrong, stop silencing it. Rule 3. Build a life where peace is your starting point, not the prize you have to earn. If being with someone means you're constantly seeking clarity, replaying conversations, justifying your instincts, you're not in love. You're in a power imbalance. And here's the part that's hardest to admit. Sometimes we stay, not because we're blind, but because we still want the lie to be true. We want to believe that they didn't mean it, that this time is different, that the good moments outweigh the confusion. But deep down, you know better, because real connection doesn't leave you anxious. Real love doesn't hide in shadows. Real loyalty doesn't require detective work. So stop trying to understand people who operate on different values. You'll never make sense of someone who sees honesty as optional and deception as a survival strategy. Let them go. Not with anger, but with clarity. Let them rewrite the story if they want. Let them say you changed. Let them call you cold. You owe them nothing, because the more honest you become about what you've felt, what you've seen, and what you'll no longer allow, the more you attract people who have nothing to hide. And when you finally walk away, don't just leave them behind. Leave behind the version of you who tolerated it, the one who settled for confusion, the one who believed comfort was worth more than clarity. And in his place, build a man who doesn't flinch when confronted, who doesn't doubt himself when questioned, who walks in truth even when it's uncomfortable. A man who values peace more than promises, consistency more than chemistry, action more than apology, because once you know what deception feels like, you stop chasing closure, you stop collecting evidence, you stop waiting for them to change, and you start choosing you. Number 3, emotional manipulation. Some betrayals don't show up as lies. They show up as smiles that come too quickly, as silence that feels too calculated, as tears that arrive just in time to avoid accountability. It's not always the words they use. Sometimes it's the words they leave out. Sometimes it's not the storm, but the stillness before it that drowns you. Emotional manipulation doesn't come crashing in. It leaks. Drop by drop, day by day, until one morning you wake up and you no longer recognize the man in the mirror. You're not weaker, you're just exhausted from constantly defending yourself against accusations you didn't expect, from apologizing for feelings you weren't allowed to have, from walking on emotional glass in a home you once called safe. This betrayal doesn't scream, it whispers. It rewrites the rules of communication, then punishes you for breaking them, even when you didn't know they changed. And if you've ever loved someone who flipped the narrative every time you voiced your pain, you know the weight I'm talking about. You bring up a problem, they bring up your tone. You ask for clarity. They say you're attacking them. You explain your boundary. They call it control. Suddenly, you're not resolving the issue. You're defending your right to even feel it. And the deeper you go, the more you start to wonder, am I overreacting? Is it really that bad? Maybe I am too sensitive. That's the strategy. Not to hurt you all at once, but to teach you slowly, methodically, that your perception is flawed, that your needs are burdensome, that love comes with the condition of emotional silence, and the cruelest part, it works. You shrink, you question yourself, you delay your truth. Not because you're weak, but because you've been taught that peace only exists when you surrender your voice. It's not love. It's theater, a carefully directed scene where you're always the villain and they're always the misunderstood victim. You say sorry for crossing invisible lines. You hesitate to speak because you're not sure which version of the truth you're allowed to tell today. And slowly, you start abandoning the strongest parts of yourself, not to protect them, but to preserve the illusion of harmony. And society doesn't help. It teaches men that endurance equals strength, that if you're a real man, you'll stay, you'll fix it, you'll carry the emotional weight of two people and still smile. But what Stoicism teaches, what life eventually demands, is that true strength is not in the staying, it's in the seeing. Seeing that manipulation doesn't always come in raised voices or slammed doors, but in quiet coercion. Seeing that the person who says, "I'm doing this for us," is sometimes only doing it to maintain control. And seeing that the moment you begin to compromise your clarity just to keep their comfort, you are no longer in a relationship. You are in a psychological trap, a place where boundaries are crimes and emotional starvation is labeled as love. And here's what makes it worse. Manipulators don't look like villains. They look like charm, like care, like someone who just wants what's best. But beneath the kindness is a quiet agenda. Keep you small enough to manage. Keep you unsure enough to obey. Because confusion is the leash they use to keep you close. And the more you accept their version of you, the less access you have to your real self. So if you've ever felt guilty just for asking a question, if you've ever apologized just to avoid another emotional explosion. If you've ever told yourself, maybe if I just love harder, they'll understand. Understand this. You are not being loved. You are being trained. Trained to doubt. Trained to silence. Trained to tolerate behavior you would never accept for anyone you cared about. And the first act of rebellion, the first spark of freedom, isn't cutting them off. It's refusing to let your kindness be used as a weapon against you. It's standing in your own clarity long enough to remember what truth feels like. And that's where your story begins to change. The first act of rebellion is not walking away. It's seeing clearly. It's refusing to let someone rewrite your story, using your own guilt as the ink. It's standing still in your own perception, long enough to remember what truth feels like before it was twisted into shame. If you've ever dealt with someone who cries on cue, who brings up their trauma the moment you express pain, who says you've changed every time you enforce a boundary, then understand, you're not being selfish. You're waking up, because that's not connection, it's a performance, and you're the supporting actor in a play where they're always the hero or the helpless victim, but never the villain. And here's the trap most men fall into. They think strength means staying, fixing, proving they can love someone through the manipulation. But real strength, it's knowing when to stop explaining. It's recognizing that some people don't want to understand you. Because if they did, they'd lose control, and control was the goal all along. They don't want peace, they want power, and every time you second-guess yourself, they win a little more. That's why walking away isn't an escape. It's a declaration. It says, my sanity matters. My truth matters. My peace is no longer negotiable. But you can't get there without first reclaiming your internal compass, because manipulation doesn't just lie to you. It teaches you to lie to yourself, to call chaos passion, to call silence strength, to call self-abandonment love. So how do you break free? Step 1, self-awareness. Write it down. How do you feel after speaking with them? Do you leave drained, confused, or ashamed? Look for patterns, not just moments. How many times have you apologized for things you didn't do? How many times has your honesty been labeled as aggression? And then ask yourself this: if someone you loved was treated the way you're being treated, would you let it slide? And if the answer is no, then why do you allow it for yourself? Step 2, emotional detachment, not coldness, not cruelty, clarity, the ability to care, but still choose distance, the ability to feel, but not abandon your self-respect. Manipulators feed on empathy. They survive on guilt. They thrive when you're trying to be the good guy. So starve that dynamic. Don't fight. Don't defend. Just observe and adjust your access. They'll call you heartless. They'll say you changed. They'll say you're not the man you used to be, and they'll be right. You're not. You've grown, and anyone who needs you to stay small, confused, and easy to manipulate doesn't love you. They love control over you. Step 3, build your emotional fortress. not a wall that keeps love out, but a gate that keeps manipulation from getting in. And it begins with how you treat yourself. Do you give yourself permission to walk away from what hurts, or do you bully yourself into staying? Because real men don't quit. Stoicism teaches us this. Endurance is only a virtue when the pain serves a purpose. But enduring manipulation only serves the manipulator. So pay attention if you leave conversations feeling more lost than when you entered. If you find yourself justifying why someone is not always like that. If you shrink your boundaries just to keep someone close, that's not love, that's survival. And the moment you realize that love should not feel like survival, you'll stop calling it love at all. Final truth: no one has the right to twist your reality in the name of affection. And if someone makes you feel guilty for having needs, that's manipulation. If they deflect every time you ask for accountability, that sansaratre satinti trust manipulation. If they only show kindness after you break down, that's manipulation. And if every disagreement turns into an attack on your character, that's not a relationship, that's a psychological battleground. And you don't fix that by loving them harder. You fix it by loving yourself enough to walk away, to rebuild your world around people who don't need to confuse you, to keep you close. And once you've done that, once you've tasted the stillness of peace, you'll never again chase the chaos that once disguised itself as love. If you've made it this far, you're not just watching a video, you're standing at the edge of who you used to be and who you're about to become. You've felt the sting, you've lived through the silence, and you've carried questions in your chest that no one else could answer, because you thought it made you weak to ask. But let me be clear, you were not foolish for believing, not soft for staying, not broken for hoping. You had heart, you had loyalty, you had love, and now you have clarity. That's what growth gives you, not noise, not drama, but stillness, sharp vision, and the quiet refusal to ever be taken for granted again. Because the most powerful transformation doesn't happen when you scream, but when you finally go silent and mean it. You've been through things most people will never know, not because you were weak, but because you were strong enough to give love another chance, even when it cost you. But that ends here. Healing begins when you stop guarding the ones who hurt you and start defending the man you're becoming, a man who protects his peace without apology, a man who doesn't need to shout to be heard, a man who builds a life so steady manipulation can't shake it, so honest deception can't live in it, so clear betrayal can't hide in it. This is your line in the sand, not a moment of vengeance, but a declaration of dignity. And if you're ready for that, I want you to say something, not to me, but to yourself. No more. Whisper it, write it, feel it, echo, not with anger, but with finality, because men like you don't stay wounded. They rebuild, not from ego, but from understanding, not from pain, but from truth. And when you support this space, when you share this message, you're not just helping a video grow. You're proving something deeper, that men still exist, who choose honesty over approval, stillness over noise, and purpose over pleasing. Men who are done chasing women, who never plan to stay. Men who no longer explain their worth. Men who quietly walk away. Because peace speaks louder than proof. If that's you, then stand with us. Not because it's trendy, but because it's time. Hit that subscribe button, drop a comment, share this message with someone who's been stuck in their silence too long, because someone out there is still holding their breath, waiting for a man like you to show them it's okay to exhale.